"Where's her father?" the guest whispered as the bride wiped tears behind her white veil. The officiant stepped forward awkwardly, ready to apologize for the missing escort. But as the music stopped, the chapel doors burst open. 12 soldiers marched in formation. Leading them was Captain Miller, her father's unit commander. "He's on duty, but we're here to walk his daughter down the aisle for him." Thomas Weller, 52 years old, former Delta Force operative, now a senior military rescue specialist. Single father who raised his daughter Emily from the age of 3. His daughter was getting married today. Thomas had promised to hold her hand and walk her down the aisle. The most sacred promise he'd ever made to another human being. He had prepared everything with military precision. His dress uniform pressed to perfection, his old Delta Force badge polished until it gleamed, white shirt ironed 3 days in advance and hanging in protective plastic. But at 3 a.m. on the wedding morning, his radio crackled with an emergency alert. Tunnel collapse at the Fort Bragg training facility. 12 civilians trapped underground. Critical shortage of qualified rescue personnel with his specialized training. Thomas held his radio with shaking hands, staring at Emily's wedding invitation propped against his mirror, then kissed it gently. "Forgive me, sweetheart. Being a good father isn't enough today, but a soldier doesn't get to choose when duty calls." Emily kept waiting at the bridal suite, right up until 30 minutes before the ceremony, still checking her phone for any word from her father. The wedding guests began their whispered conversations. Typical military father, always putting his soldiers before his own daughter. "I heard he's missed every major milestone. Birthday parties, graduation, now this. Some men should never become fathers if they can't prioritize family." Emily bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, saying nothing to defend him. She whispered to her reflection, "If he doesn't come, I'll still stand strong, like he taught me to do when I was little and scared." The chapel was decorated exactly how they'd planned together 6 months ago. White roses everywhere because they were her mother's favorite. The same flowers from her parents' wedding 25 years ago, before her mother died in that car accident when Emily was 3. Emily's wedding dress was perfect. The dress her father had helped select, the one that made him cry when she tried it on for the first time. "You look exactly like your mother," he had whispered then, touching the pearl necklace around her neck. "But you have my stubborn, loyal heart beating in your chest." Now that stubborn heart was breaking, not from anger, but from understanding. She had always understood. Her father wasn't just any soldier. He was the man other soldiers called when everything went wrong, when lives hung in the balance, when technical expertise and fearless leadership were the only things standing between life and death. She had grown up watching him leave for emergencies, school plays, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, graduation day. Each time he would kneel down, look directly into her eyes and say, "Someone desperately needs me right now. But you're permanently carved into my heart." Have you ever loved someone who was always absent for others? Comment, "I understand," if you've waited for someone who chose duty over presence. Just as Emily was about to make her entrance alone, her hands trembling as she realized no father would escort her down the aisle. At Fort Bragg, Captain Miller, the man Thomas had carried to safety through enemy fire in Afghanistan, received word from base communications. Weller's daughter is getting married this morning, and he's stuck in this rescue operation for at least 6 more hours. Miller immediately called the old Special Forces team, the brotherhood who had served alongside Thomas for over 15 years across 3 different combat deployments. "Gentlemen, we can't replace Thomas as a father, but we can damn sure walk beside his daughter as his representatives." 10 men responded within 20 minutes. Not just any soldiers, but Thomas's hand-picked team from the most dangerous missions they'd ever survived together. They wore their dress white uniforms, carried their old unit insignia with pride, each man holding a small bouquet of white roses to match the bride's chosen flowers. Miller requested permission from the chapel manager. The civilian hesitated initially, but when he understood the full situation, he stood at respectful attention. "Absolutely, gentlemen. I'll personally hold those doors open for you and ensure perfect timing." These weren't random military personnel. They were Thomas's brotherhood, men who had bled together, fought together, saved each other's lives in the worst circumstances imaginable. Sergeant Rodriguez, who Thomas had carried 4 miles through hostile territory with 2 broken legs during the Iraq deployment. Corporal Jenkins, who Thomas had pulled from a burning armored vehicle under heavy enemy fire in Syria. Lieutenant Hayes, who Thomas had given his own reserve parachute to when Hayes's primary and backup both failed over Somalia. Master Sergeant Collins, who Thomas had performed field surgery on using nothing but a combat knife and medical supplies during a 72-hour siege. Each man carried a story. Each man owed Thomas their continued existence on this earth. Miller gathered them in the chapel parking lot for final instructions. Gentlemen, Thomas Weller has never asked us for a single favor, not once in 15 years. He saved our lives, got us home safely to our families, and never requested anything in return. The men nodded silently, understanding the weight of this moment. Today, his only daughter needs an escort down the wedding aisle. Thomas can't be here because he's currently saving someone else's family from a collapsed tunnel. So we're going to be his hands, his physical presence, his paternal pride, walking her toward her new life. They formed up in perfect military formation. 2 columns, 6 men each. Miller took point position as squad leader. Inside the chapel, restless guests were checking their watches. The bride was about to make her entrance completely alone, which would become the gossip story for months. But Miller had one critical call to make first, directly to Thomas himself via encrypted radio. Sergeant Major, we have a situation developing at your daughter's wedding ceremony. Thomas's voice cracked with exhaustion and emotion over the static. What's wrong? Is Emily safe? Is she okay? She's absolutely perfect, sir, but she's about to walk that aisle without an escort, requesting permission to fill that role in your place? The radio went completely silent for 45 seconds. Then Thomas's voice came back, barely above a whisper. Tell her that if her father can't walk her down the aisle, then the men her father saved should do it instead. Tell her I'm watching and I'm proud. Miller smiled with military precision. Roger that, sir. Consider it our highest honor and privilege. Have you ever witnessed someone else fulfill a promise for another person? Share a moment when unexpected kindness changed everything. The bride appeared at the chapel entrance, standing alone with perfect posture, no escort beside her. The congregation began their uncomfortable murmuring. Where exactly is her father? How could he miss this? Emily held her head high with military bearing, but before she could take her first independent step, the wedding music stopped completely. The chapel doors exploded open with ceremonial force. 12 soldiers in dress white uniforms marched through in perfect formation, boots hitting the marble floor in synchronized rhythm, eyes forward, faces displaying solemn respect. Captain Miller led the formation, carrying a folded piece of paper in his pristine white-gloved hand. He approached Emily with military precision, dropped to one knee in full view of the congregation, and offered her the handwritten note. Your father specifically asked me to deliver this message. If your daddy can't walk you down the aisle today, then let the men your daddy saved do it for him. Emily's carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. The entire congregation rose to their feet spontaneously, many wiping their own eyes. Her mother gripped Miller's arm tightly, nodding through her own overwhelming tears of pride and gratitude. The soldiers executed a flawless formation shift. 6 men positioned themselves along each side of the aisle, standing at perfect attention, creating an honor guard corridor that stretched from the entrance to the altar. Miller offered Emily his strong arm. Ma'am, it would be our absolute privilege and honor. Emily looked at these warriors surrounding her, her father's chosen brothers, the men who came home alive because of his courage and leadership. He's really not coming, is he? She whispered, needing to hear the truth spoken aloud. Ma'am, your father is currently inside a collapsed tunnel system right now, pulling injured survivors out one by one using his bare hands. He's exactly where the world needs him to be. But he sent us because you're exactly where his heart needs to be represented. Emily nodded with newfound understanding, carefully wiping her tears. She placed her hand on Miller's offered arm with trust. They began the ceremonial walk, slowly, deliberately, with profound dignity. Each soldier they passed executed a sharp salute in perfect sequence. The groom, Marine Lieutenant Morrison, stood at rigid attention as his bride approached. He understood completely. This wasn't just a wedding ceremony anymore. This had become a demonstration of military honor and family loyalty. The chapel fell into reverent silence except for the rhythmic sound of military boots on marble and the quiet, emotional sobs of witnesses. Emily walked between these battle-tested warriors, men who carried her father's legacy, his values, his unwavering commitment to protecting others above himself. Halfway down the aisle, she stopped walking suddenly. Miller looked at her with immediate concern. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Emily turned to face the entire congregation directly. Her voice carried clearly through the silent chapel, with strength inherited from her father. "My father isn't physically here today because someone else's family desperately needed him more than I do right now. But he didn't abandon me or forget about me. He sent his best men, his most trusted brothers, to stand in his place and represent his love." She turned to Miller with pride. "Captain, would you please tell everyone exactly what my father is doing at this very moment?" Miller's voice rang with military pride and clarity. "Ma'am, Sergeant Major Thomas Weller is currently leading a complex rescue operation to extract 12 trapped civilians from a collapsed underground training facility. So far, he has personally brought 8 people out alive, including 2 children." The congregation erupted in thunderous, sustained applause. Emily smiled brilliantly through her tears. "That's my dad. Saving people's lives is what he does best. And today he saved my wedding too by sending all of you." She continued down the aisle with her head held high, surrounded by living representations of honor and sacrifice. When they reached the altar, Miller didn't simply hand her off. He made a formal announcement to the assembled witnesses. "Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Major Thomas Weller couldn't physically be here today because he's doing what he's always done, putting others' desperate needs before his own comfort. But his daughter learned from the absolute best. She's marrying a fellow Marine today, and she's walking into marriage the same way she's lived her entire life, with honor, dignity, and the deep knowledge that real love sometimes means choosing service over self-interest." If you've ever witnessed a moment when honor replaced heartbreak, comment respect below. Immediately after the ceremony concluded, Emily received an urgent video call on her phone. Her father appeared on the small screen, face completely covered in concrete dust, voice hoarse from shouting rescue commands, but smiling through exhausted tears of joy. "I watched every single moment, sweetheart. You were absolutely beautiful, and you walked between the men I trust most in this entire world." Emily's voice caught with emotion. "I'm not angry with you, Dad. You weren't physically at my wedding, but your presence was in every single man who walked me down that aisle." One of the soldiers spoke up respectfully. "Your father didn't miss anything important, ma'am. He just sent his whole team to represent him perfectly." The rescue mission had been completely successful. All 12 civilians were safely extracted. Thomas had spent 18 consecutive hours pulling people from dangerous rubble, using specialized skills he'd developed during 20 years of military service. But he had also watched his daughter's entire wedding ceremony on his phone, propped carefully against a rescue vehicle, while medics checked him for severe exhaustion. Every single guest at the wedding had seen the live video feed. They watched Thomas Weller crying openly as his daughter walked down the aisle surrounded by honor guards. They saw him salute proudly when she reached the altar. That evening, Emily sent her father a framed photograph from the wedding. It showed her standing confidently in the middle of 12 soldiers, all saluting simultaneously. The handwritten note attached read, "Dad, I was born from a soldier's heart and raised with a soldier's values. Today I got married with a soldier's pride surrounding me." Thomas immediately framed that photograph and placed it in his deployment gear bag. The next time he was sent overseas, it would travel with him. 6 months later, when Thomas finally received extended leave, he visited Emily and her new Marine husband. "I owe you a serious apology," he began with genuine remorse. Emily stopped him immediately. "Dad, you gave me something far better than just walking me down the aisle. You showed me what authentic love actually looks like. It's not always being physically present. It's making absolutely sure someone trustworthy can be there when you can't." Jake, her Marine husband, shook Thomas's hand with respect. "Sir, I completely understand duty. What you did that day, sending your team to honor your daughter, that's true leadership." Thomas looked at his daughter, now married, now stronger, now fully understanding what he'd tried to teach her throughout her entire life. Sometimes the greatest gift a father can give his daughter is showing her that love isn't just about being present. It's about making sure she's never truly alone, even when you absolutely can't be there. If you believe honor can be transmitted through others, then every story deserves witnesses. Follow for more untold chapters. Some people can't attend the most important moments, not because they forgot or don't care, but because someone else desperately needs them more. But absence never means abandonment, because if you live with genuine honor, there will always be people ready to step forward for you. If you've ever lost someone on an important day but still felt their presence through others, leave a single dot below, because we're sharing stories that haven't been told yet. Stories where duty and love aren't opposites, where sacrifice creates lasting legacy, where real fathers raise daughters who understand that sometimes love means choosing service over self. The wedding that almost didn't happen became the wedding no one will ever forget.